Here's what nobody tells you. Your first $1,000 is designed to feel impossible. You know that feeling when you open a savings app, see $0 saved and immediately close it like you just walked in on something you shouldn't have? That moment of shame mixed with defiance where you tell yourself you'll start next month, except next month you're saying the same thing, not because you're bad with money, but because the entire system is rigged against someone starting from zero. My name is Nick, and I've spent years studying why some people effortlessly build wealth while others stay trapped in this weird financial purgatory where they make decent money but somehow never have any. If you want to understand the actual mechanics of breaking free from zero instead of just hoping things magically improve, you're in the right place. Let's start with a hard truth that's going to make you uncomfortable. The reason your first 1,000 feels impossible isn't about your income. I've seen people making 30 grand a year hit their first 1,000 faster than people making 6 figures. The difference isn't the money coming in. It's something far more psychological, far more insidious, and once you understand it, everything changes. When you have $0 saved, your brain operates in what researchers call scarcity mode. This isn't some motivational speaker nonsense. This is actual neuroscience. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for long-term planning and rational decision-making, literally gets hijacked. Think about the last time you were really hungry. Not just, I could eat hungry, but genuinely starving. Did you make good decisions about what to eat? Of course not. You grabbed whatever was fastest and closest, probably something terrible for you because your brain wasn't thinking long-term anymore. Financial scarcity does the exact same thing, except it's constant. When you're at zero, every financial decision becomes a survival decision. You take the first job offer even if it's terrible because you can't afford to be picky. You buy cheap shoes that fall apart in 3 months instead of decent ones that last 3 years because you don't have the upfront cash. You pay late fees, overdraft charges, and interest on everything because you're always one step behind. But here's where it gets really twisted. The system knows this. Credit card companies understand that someone at zero is worth more to them than someone with savings. Why? Because you'll pay their fees. You'll carry a balance. You'll take their predatory interest rates because you don't have options. Banks charge you money for not having money. Let that sink in. Overdraft fees, minimum balance penalties, monthly maintenance charges. These are literally taxes on being broke. I want you to imagine 2 people. Person A has $0 saved. Person B has 1,000. They both face the same unexpected $400 car repair. Person A panics. They put it on a credit card at 22% interest, or worse, they take out a payday loan at 300% APR. That $400 repair now costs them $600 by the time they pay it off over 6 months. Person B, they're annoyed, but they transfer $400 from savings, get the repair done, and move on with their life. Same problem, completely different universes of stress and cost. This is what financial experts call the broke tax. When you're at zero, everything costs more. You can't buy in bulk even though it's cheaper per unit. You can't take advantage of sales because you don't have cash available. You can't negotiate better rates on anything because you're not a valuable customer. The grocery store doesn't care about your loyalty when you're buying single rolls of toilet paper instead of the 30-pack. Now here's what makes this truly maddening. Most financial advice completely ignores this reality. They tell you to invest in index funds when you're trying to figure out if you can afford both gas and groceries this week. They talk about retirement accounts when you're worried about making rent. They suggest you just save more as if you haven't thought of that already. The traditional advice goes something like this. Create a budget, cut your expenses, save 10% of your income. Sounds reasonable, right? Except when you're at zero, a budget feels like a document of everything you can't have. Cutting expenses means eliminating the few small pleasures that make your life bearable. and saving 10%. If you're making $3,000 a month after taxes and your rent is $1,500, that math doesn't work. You're already choosing between saving and eating. So what actually works? Not what should work in theory, but what works in practice for someone staring at $0 saved. The answer is going to sound almost stupid in its simplicity, but I promise you there's real psychology behind it. You need to save something so small it feels absurd. I'm talking $5. Maybe 10 if you're feeling ambitious. Not per week, not even per day. Just once, right now. This violates every piece of traditional financial advice you've ever heard. Financial planners will tell you that $5 doesn't matter, that it's not enough to make a difference, that you need to think bigger. They're wrong. Or rather, they're right about the math but completely wrong about human psychology. $5 saved when you have zero isn't about the $5. It's about breaking the identity of being someone who has $0 saved. Human beings are story-driven creatures. We create narratives about who we are and then we act in ways that confirm those stories. If your story is, "I'm someone who can't save money," then every financial decision you make will reinforce that identity. You'll find ways to spend any extra money that comes in because that's what someone who can't save does. But the moment you save $5 and leave it there, you've disrupted the story. Something weird happens in your brain when you see a balance that isn't zero. It doesn't matter that it's $5. It doesn't matter that $5 can't pay for anything meaningful. What matters is that the number isn't zero anymore. Your brain starts protecting that $5 like it's 5,000. You'll find yourself thinking twice about purchases you would have made automatically before. Not because $5 changes your financial situation, but because you're now someone who has money saved. This is where most people screw up. They save $5, feel proud for about 18 seconds, then immediately think of something they need and spend it. The cycle continues. Zero feels normal again. The brief moment of being someone with savings disappears. You need to understand something crucial here. That $5 is not for spending, ever. Even when you have 1,000 saved, that first 5 stays untouched. It's not emergency money, it's not fun money, it's proof. Proof that you're capable of not spending every dollar that enters your life. That's the real value. It's a psychological anchor point. Now here's where it gets interesting. Once you have that $5 sitting there for a week, something unexpected happens. You start looking for another $5 to add to it. Not because someone told you to, not because you created a budget spreadsheet, but because your brain wants to see that number grow. You've accidentally gamified your own savings. This is the opposite of how traditional financial advice approaches the problem. They tell you to create elaborate systems before you start. Set up automatic transfers. Calculate your savings rate. Build a comprehensive budget with 17 categories. For someone at zero, that's like telling someone who can't swim to compete in a triathlon. You don't need a system yet. You need momentum. The psychology here is called the Zeigarnik effect. Unfinished tasks create mental tension. When you have $5 saved, your brain registers it as an unfinished task. It wants to see what happens next. $10? $20? The tension pulls you forward, but if you try to save $100 right away, you'll fail, and failure creates the opposite effect. Your brain learns that saving is something you're bad at, so you save 5 more, then maybe 7. The amounts don't matter. What matters is the frequency. You're training your brain to associate positive feelings with seeing that number increase. Every time you add money, even a tiny amount, you get a small hit of dopamine. You're literally rewiring your reward system. Most people at this stage make a critical mistake. They tell everyone about their new savings habit. They post on social media about their financial journey. They explain to friends how they're finally getting their money together. This is a disaster. Research shows that announcing your goals gives you a premature sense of achievement. Your brain gets the reward for declaring the intention without doing the work. Keep your mouth shut. Let the balance speak for itself. After a few weeks of this, you'll probably have somewhere between $50 and $200 saved. Still not enough to matter financially. Still enough to completely change your psychology. You now have what I call options money. Not enough options to quit your job or move to a new city, but enough to make small decisions differently. Your coworker wants to grab lunch and you really can't afford it? You can say no without the crushing feeling that you're missing out on life. Your phone screen cracks. You can get it fixed without having a panic attack. A small unexpected bill arrives. It's annoying instead of catastrophic. These tiny shifts accumulate into a completely different emotional relationship with money. This is the point where traditional advice starts to become useful. Now you can think about a budget. Now automatic transfers make sense. Now you can start optimizing. But most financial advice skips the foundation entirely and jumps straight to optimization. It's like teaching calculus to someone who hasn't learned multiplication. Let me tell you what happens to most people around the $200 mark. They sabotage themselves. Something comes up. A friend's birthday, a sale on something they've been wanting, a minor emergency that's not really an emergency. They dip into the savings. Just this once. Just 20 bucks. The balance drops to 180. Here's the truth about that moment. It's not really about the $20. It's about testing whether you're serious. Your brain is checking. Are we actually someone who saves now, or was that just a temporary thing? If you let the balance drop and don't immediately replace it, you're sending a message. The message is, savings are optional. Money that exists can be spent. This is why that first $5 stays forever. It's your line in the sand. Everything above it can fluctuate, but that baseline never moves. You're teaching yourself that saving isn't just something you do when it's convenient. It's part of your identity now. The next milestone is $1,000. This is where things get real. $1,000 is enough to handle most small emergencies. Car repair, medical bill, last-minute flight home. You're not wealthy, but you're also not fragile anymore. The anxiety that's been humming in the background of your life for years starts to quiet down. Getting from 200 to 1,000 feels different than getting from 0 to 200. The excitement of watching the balance grow fades a bit. The novelty wears off. This is where discipline replaces motivation. You're not doing it because it feels good anymore. You're doing it because you're someone who saves money. The identity has solidified. Most people never reach this point. They get stuck in the cycle of saving a bit, spending it, saving again. They treat their savings account like a holding area for money that's about to be spent rather than money that's being accumulated. The difference between these two mindsets is everything. Your brain is remarkably good at justifying spending. It will create elaborate stories about why you deserve this thing, why this expense is actually an investment, why this particular situation is the exception. The only way to combat this is with an equally powerful story. The story is, I am someone who has money saved. People who have money saved don't spend it on this. When you hit $1,000, sit with it for a moment. Look at that number. Remember when 0 felt permanent. Remember when $5 seemed impossible to not spend. You did something most people never do. You changed. Now the game changes entirely. Between $1,000 and $5,000, you're building what I call operational freedom. This is the range where you stop making decisions based purely on survival and start making decisions based on opportunity. At $1,000, you can handle an emergency. At $5,000, you can take a risk. The difference is massive. Think about your job. With $1,000 saved, if your boss is terrible, you're still trapped. You need that paycheck. You can't afford to rock the boat. But with $5,000, you can have a conversation. You can push back on unreasonable demands. You can start looking for something better without the desperation that makes you accept the first offer that comes along. The math here gets interesting. If you're saving $200 a month, getting from $1,000 to $5,000 takes 20 months. That's almost 2 years. This is where most people give up. They see the finish line moving further away. They start thinking about all the things they could buy with that money right now instead of waiting years for some abstract future benefit. Your brain doesn't like delayed gratification. It wants the reward now. This is why lottery tickets sell. This is why credit card debt exists. The immediate pleasure of buying something feels better than the theoretical benefit of having money saved. But something shifts around $2,000. You start noticing opportunities you couldn't see before. Your friend mentions they're hiring at their company for more money than you're making. Before, you would have thought about it and done nothing. Now you can actually apply. If you get the job, great. If the transition has a gap, you can survive it. This is leverage, real leverage. Not the kind finance bros talk about with investments, the kind that changes the actual circumstances of your daily life. You're not rich, you're not even comfortable yet, but you're not powerless anymore. At $3,000, weird things start happening. You stop checking your bank account before buying groceries. Not because you're careless, but because you know there's a buffer. The mental energy you were spending on financial anxiety gets redirected. Maybe you sleep better. Maybe you're less irritable. Maybe you finally have the bandwidth to think about your career instead of just surviving your job. People around you will notice the change before you do. You'll seem more confident, more relaxed. They won't know why. They might assume you got a raise or inherited money. The truth is simpler and harder to explain. You just stop being scared all the time. The path from 3 to 5,000 accelerates if you let it. By now, you've built the habits. You know what you can and can't afford. You've developed an instinct for distinguishing between expenses that matter and expenses that just feel good temporarily. This instinct is worth more than the money itself. Here's what nobody tells you. Somewhere in this range between 2 and 4,000, you'll face a test. Something will happen that seems to justify spending a chunk of your savings. Maybe your car needs work, maybe your laptop dies, maybe there's a wedding or a trip that everyone else is going on. The test isn't whether you spend the money. Sometimes you should. The test is whether you immediately rebuild what you spent. If you drop from 4,000 to 3,000 for a legitimate reason and then just accept 3,000 as your new baseline, you've failed. Not morally, not permanently, but you've taught yourself that savings are temporary. The people who make it past 5,000 are the ones who treat any dip as a temporary state that must be corrected. They don't panic when they have to spend savings. They just mark it as debt they owe to their future self and pay it back. $5,000 is a psychological fortress. This is where you become genuinely difficult to financially break, not impossible. You can still be destroyed by medical debt or catastrophic events, but normal life can't touch you anymore. Surprise expenses are annoying, not devastating. Job loss is concerning, not existential. Watch what happens to your career trajectory once you hit this point. You start taking smart risks. You speak up in meetings because getting fired isn't a death sentence. You ask for raises because you can afford to look for another job if they say no. You turn down projects that don't make sense because you're not desperate for every dollar. Your salary might not change immediately, but your earning potential explodes. Confidence isn't just attractive in dating, it's valuable in negotiation. The person who needs the deal always loses. The person who can walk away controls the conversation. This is why wealthy people seem to make money effortlessly. They're not smarter. They're not more deserving. They just negotiate from a position of not needing the money desperately. And now, you're starting to do the same thing, just at a smaller scale. The jump from 5 to 10,000 happens faster than you expect. You're saving more because you're earning more, because you're negotiating better, because you have savings. It's a feedback loop that compounds. $10,000 is the number where everything we're about to discuss in the final part becomes possible. This is where you stop playing defense and start playing offense. This is where your money stops being a shield and becomes a weapon. Not against people, against the limitations that kept you stuck. $10,000 is where money stops being about survival and starts being about possibility. This is the threshold where most people finally understand what wealth actually means. It's not about buying expensive things, it's about having options that didn't exist before. At 10,000, you can quit a toxic job without another one lined up and survive for months while you find something better. You can invest in yourself through courses or certifications that might increase your income. You can start a side business with real capital behind it. You can help family members in genuine emergencies without destroying your own stability. These aren't hypothetical scenarios. This is what 10,000 actually buys you. But here's something strange that happens at this level. Some people stop. They hit 10,000 and suddenly become terrified of spending any of it. They've worked so hard to get here that the money becomes precious in a way that actually limits them. They won't invest in opportunities because they can't stand to see that number decrease. They've built a fortress but trapped themselves inside it. This is the paradox of security. The same discipline that got you here can prevent you from going further. You have to recognize when holding money becomes more expensive than spending it strategically. That certification that costs $2,000 but increases your salary by $10,000 annually, that's not spending. That's buying money at a discount. The business idea that needs $5,000 to launch but could replace your income. That's not risk. That's calculated investment. The difference between 10 and 20,000 is where you learn to make money work instead of just accumulating it. You're not spending less at this point, you're probably spending more, but you're earning even more than that. Your income has likely increased significantly because you've been making better career moves from a position of strength. Something else happens here that nobody talks about. Your peer group starts shifting. The people who are constantly broke start feeling distant. Not because you're judging them, but because your problems are different now. They're worried about making rent. You're thinking about whether to max out your retirement contributions. They're deciding between streaming services. You're comparing investment accounts. These aren't better or worse problems, they're just different universes. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Some of your old friends will resent this. They'll make comments about how you've changed or you think you're better than them. They're not entirely wrong. You have changed. You do think differently about money. But that doesn't make you better. It makes you different. Some friendships survive this transition. Others don't. This is part of the cost that nobody mentions when they talk about building wealth. 20,000 is professional money. This is where you can take a month off to travel without it being irresponsible. You can handle a major car repair without stress. You can cover a friend's emergency without expecting repayment. You've built something that would take a middle-class family decades to accumulate if they followed conventional advice about budgeting and slowly saving. The path from 20 to 50,000 is where compounding starts becoming visible. If you're investing part of this money, which you should be, you're now making thousands per year from returns alone. Your money is generating money while you sleep. This was always theoretically true, but now it's actually noticeable in your account balance. 50,000 is the number where you stop worrying about money in daily life. Not because you're rich. You're not. But because you've built enough buffer that normal expenses don't register as threats anymore. Groceries cost what they cost. Gas prices fluctuate and you don't care. You can go to dinner without checking your bank account first. This is also where you need to resist lifestyle inflation aggressively. You can afford a nicer apartment now. You could lease a luxury car. You could eat out every night. But every dollar you spend on impressing people who don't care about you is a dollar that won't be working for your future. The people who make it past this point without backsliding are the ones who realize that the real flex isn't what you drive. It's the number in your investment account that nobody sees. Beyond 50,000, you're playing a completely different game. You're thinking about tax optimization and asset allocation. You're considering real estate not as a place to live, but as an investment vehicle. You're looking at starting businesses or making angel investments. Money has transformed from something you need into something you deploy strategically. But here's what matters more than any specific number. The discipline you built getting here is permanent if you choose to keep it. You've proven to yourself that you can delay gratification, make hard choices, and stick to a plan even when it's uncomfortable. These skills apply to everything: career advancement, relationships, health, learning new abilities. You've basically given yourself a masterclass in achieving difficult things. The number itself almost doesn't matter. Someone with 10,000 in savings and the discipline to build it is wealthier in every meaningful sense than someone with 50,000 they inherited and blew through. Because the person who built it can build it again. They've developed the operating system for creating wealth. The money is just the output. So where do you actually need to be? That depends entirely on what you're trying to accomplish. But if you're starting from zero or close to it, your first target is 2,000. That's where panic ends. Then 5,000, where normal life can't break you. Then 10,000, where options appear. Everything after that is just scaling the same principles. The real question isn't how much money you need. It's whether you're becoming the type of person who builds and keeps wealth. Because that transformation is worth more than any specific account balance. That's what actually changes your life permanently. You already know what to do. You've known the entire time. Save something today. Anything. $5, 10 if you can. Not because it's financially significant, because it proves you're capable of doing something most people never do. Stop reading articles about saving. Stop watching videos about budgeting. Stop planning to start next month. Open whatever app you use and move money right now. Make the number not zero. Everything I've described, every milestone, every psychological shift, it all starts with that first transfer. And the longer you wait, the more your brain reinforces the story that you're someone who can't do this. You're not. You're someone who hasn't done it yet. There's a difference. The system is designed to keep you at zero. Credit card companies need you broke. Banks profit from your overdrafts. Retailers depend on your impulsive spending. Every force in the economy wants you to stay exactly where you are. The only person who can change that is you. And the only time that matters is now. Your first 1,000 isn't impossible. It just feels that way because nobody ever explained what's actually happening in your brain when you try to save from zero. Now you know. The question is whether you'll use that knowledge or just file it away as interesting information you'll get to eventually. Eventually never comes. Do it now.